should be out.
Should be. I think you get red. Is there a red light or something?
Way up there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it. Yeah, right.
Right. So, this Matariki Waihi was formed about 12 years ago, roughly. Can you just tell me, because you're a leader in the school, and I think you were part of the formation of it at the time? Wow, cool. So, what is your understanding around why Matariki Waihi was formed?
I know it was the foundation of it was based on some innovation funding that they got. I think it was Cookie and my sister Tracy got it through. I don't know who you get it through, but it was around increasing the cultural responsiveness or Te Ao Māori practices for schools and stuff. And I think they started that the first ever Te Pū Mau Hui that all the principals at the time went on. And I think it might have been one of the work projects on the back of that, if I'm right. I think it was after that was one of their things about collectively, essentially, from what I understand, creating a platform. I suppose at that time, and from what I remember, it wasn't an ongoing one. Like there was, in fact, the very next year after, well, there was no Matariki Waihi, it was a different one, the Tūranga Waiwai thing up at the college.
Right.
But then obviously as time's gone on, in order to make sure there's still space or something, it's kind of continued. So that's my understanding of how it came about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what benefits do you see in this initiative of getting all the schools together to do Matariki collaboratively?
I guess there's that consistency. So if you're not, or if you are, as an individual, however committed you are to, I guess, use Te Tiriti to honouring what it's about, it does provide a platform that probably wasn't there before, well, clearly wasn't there before locally. So that's a definite benefit. Yeah. I would say actually, if you're a school that does or would like to choose to not do that stuff, there is a bit of social pressure that if you're not seen to be doing it, that it kind of forces you to, in some regards, step out of your comfort zone a little bit, and for whatever purposes, do whatever you're going to do to take part. It does, when you do something different, where I guess the generalised expertise may not be known of, it brings those people out of the woodwork that have expertise and things around it that you wouldn't have known before.
Yeah.
So that has been quite cool. And then I think probably ongoing and more recently, I think one of the benefits of still having it is that now it's a challenge that you ask people why they still do it. Because now it just becomes part of the calendar, which is, you can look at it and say that's cool. And I'll just get some reasons why I think that is cool. But at the same time, I've said it myself a few years ago to Matariki Hui, why are we still doing this in terms of this way? I said, do people still know the purpose of why this is here? And so, which has turned into somewhat of an event that has a specific nature to it and topic, but yet the vision behind it beginning is that still relevant to what happens now. So that's I think that's a positive, because it's a challenging thing around why we continue to do these things, and do we need to change, or does it need to grow, or do to whatever. So but I do think the benefits are very much open to interpretation based on your perspective, without a doubt. And I don't think there's a right or wrong, it's just the way you see it based on the organisation you're in, your involvement in anything like that. Sorts of stuff. So
that's what my next one was. What, if any, implications or challenges did this put onto the school?
I remember at the time the biggest implications were the general, the traditional school, the health and safety thing. How are we going to get all these kids there? And the organisational stuff, the big things. I remember they had the big equal at the start. And then it's like anything, the more groups you have trying to organise something, the more compromises you've kind of got to work through. So I can guarantee you that, and I wasn't part of the actual organisation of that, but I can guarantee you that would have been a thing. Lots of moving parts in order to actually get things across the line.
Yeah.
I guess some of the ongoing implications that I have seen, and it's over time, is the fact that it's become an event now, pros and cons. One of the implications I see is that in some regards, an individual school's involvement or the level of involvement in it has somewhat become a de facto reflection of what your cultural responsiveness may look like in your school. You know what I mean? So it's like, oh, if you don't take part, or they mustn't don't do that at their school.
Right.
Because you're not there.
The stigma that
The stigma that you're not there,
Right.
or the stigma that, or the generalized belief that, oh, they do that so well, they must be doing that all the time.
Right.
I'm full well known as a leader that there's a very big difference between what happens for one day out of the 200 that you're at school is not always a reflection of actually what is important to you the other 999 days of the year. So that is, and I don't think that was a foreseen implication, but I can guarantee you it's probably one now. There may not be effects of that implication, but it's there. It exists.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. That's one.
What impact do you think this has had for your students?
I know at the start, there was definitely at the very start, those first few years, particularly Māori kids, they for some of them, they really saw an opportunity. It was a comfort, like there were things that were happening that they were comfortable in that realm doing that they don't see on a day-to-day basis in education. So I reckon there was a really positive swing there again. And I think a lot of that has followed on if those certain things have stayed around, like the celebration for Kapaka and all of that stuff. And, I don't know, Tupperware or whatever. So that was definitely, I reckon, has been a positive. I think actually just when you use a topic like Matariki in terms of that time of the year, we're educators. So, you don't, or you'd like to think we just don't do it because we just pulled something out of the air and we decide we're going to do that. There is a depth to the curriculum or into expansion of the curriculum to look at some of those concepts, Te Ao Māori, to deal with that. I think there's got to be a positive there. I guess anything else like that. Another one, I guess, is that it does allow, it's not so much for us here, but for some schools that have a tendency to just be quite insular and not do a lot with other, whether it's professionally or with the peers in terms of the kids. It was one of those things where you did start to recognise other faces and see people doing different things. So, and there's benefit in that in terms of that collectiveness, the whanaungatanga across schools a little bit more, at least for that period of time. And if at least it's from that one period of time, some schools built some relationships that meant they did other things together, awesome. But I'd say that another one where, depending on your perspective and involvement, what the level could look different. It would be interesting what the kids might have thought. I actually brought that up the other day, not long ago. I was like, what do our kids think Matariki is? Compared to if you asked some of the ones that were the first ones to actually. It'd be interesting.
It would be interesting. You sort of covered this a little bit. How do you think Matariki Waihi has evolved over the years? So the growth of it, maybe.
I think the growth in terms, I think the biggest growth is it's just it's expected that it will happen. Like, and if you think about something like that, I think there probably was a period of time when we was tried to be built on, make it bigger, we've got to make it better. But its longevity as an event now, yes. I don't think necessarily that was the intent, like I already said. I don't think the idea was to create an event on forever. But I think the growth of the fact is that it is still there and people expect to see it, which is kind of cool. That's been interesting. I guess.
When you say people, what are you talking about?
Or community, not just schools, but like someone else, don't you usually do this and stuff like that? I think what the growth has been helped by just some generalised societal shift around things like that. I mean, this is the first year we've got a Matariki holiday now. So,
Mhm.
you know, even if you were in Waihi 10 years ago, you'd go, oh, that's right, they did that years ago. They
Yeah.
did something, you know.
Yeah.
So you have all of that. And then I guess in terms of its expansion, I think what is maybe becoming, personally, I think it's quite cool, is that, yes, it's still Matariki Waihi, but now at least we're challenging, okay, well, does it still, are the needs the same when we started as they are now?
Yeah.
And if they're not the same, is what we do reflective of what we want to do? That's important because sometimes you can hold on so tight to your idea of what it's that you don't want to let go of that. So it's good to see. I'm not saying that everything's changing every time, but it's not as frowned upon in my experience. They just point out that, you know, maybe same thing, not doing it differently for the sake of doing it differently, but why does it have to be this? What is it? This can it be? And it's open to that type of growth and evolution, which is probably good. Because I think it would have died if you tried to keep it exactly the same. And, yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's, probably some good ones.
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to ask, and I want to get a perspective from students, Māori students, non-Māori, on it. But just from your view, do you think that, just with the sense of belonging, you sort of touched on it before, how do you think it's made an impact on your Māori learners with the sense of belonging and identity, first of all in your school and then maybe in the community? Do you think it's
it's hard to say in terms of the community of other schools kids.
Yeah.
For ours here, I don't mean this in a bad way, but I don't think it probably has made any difference or currently does make any difference. And I would hope that part of that is because that's actually what we are trying to achieve, is that it shouldn't be different. It should be that it should be normalized. That's from a very broad sense. I think the topic itself, maybe you could find. I mean, it's one of those ones. I think when you're going to go and ask a lot of people. If you wanted to find a certain data set that you wanted, you could frame the same question in the way that you're going to get what you may want.
And I don't want that.
And that's what you don't want. Yeah. But that's what it's because it's, I mean, in fairness, it's a good question, but it is very much subjective to a perception of it. And my perception that I have now as principal, compared to what I would have had at the start, is completely different. And in terms of my interpretation of what it looked like for kids at that time, it's kind of the same. Has there been an effect? Yeah, I think there would have been an effect. Yeah, absolutely. I would be interested to know if you could find some clean enough data to actually make a fairly accurate assumption of what it was and what that changes and whether there was a different discourse for a certain cohort or a certain gender or, you know, that would be interesting. But I don't know anything else. I could give you anything outside of just what I was going towards that is going to be any more valid than the next person you talk to.
Thanks, Logan. Because one was a sense of belonging and the other one was fostering their mana in the school, the Māori students' mana.
I'd say that I mean, I'd assume that across most schools, at least that gave them a window into that and an opportunity for that to be acknowledged. Actually, more than acknowledged, actually have to be respected. I have a hunch, however, over time that respect may have been worn away because it's one thing to acknowledge it at the starting point and to be thankful for that first step. But sometimes it can hurt more when you know that they're capable of making the first step, but they don't want to take any of the ones that come after. Oh no, we don't do that now. We wait till it's Matariki Waihi when we do that.
Gotcha.
You know, so where a Māori could go, oh, so you do know who I am and what I am. You know, you do see the value of my culture or what maybe we do and how we do it through this event. And then hoping that, okay, well, so what about how about when we do, and then potentially not seeing that movement? Because like I said, it created a platform, but where individual schools wanted to take that, it's completely up to them. And it's cool that that platform's still there to bring them back to go again. But yeah, there would be, I think, a variety of experiences from schools around whether that type of thing actually allows that to happen, that sense of amount for kids to grow from that event.
Yeah.
It certainly wouldn't have had a negative effect, I don't think, at the very start, but it would be interesting to see maybe.
Totally. Has this initiative strengthened relationships with whānau involvement in your kura?
Not in any different ways that it would have in other ways, not solely due to this, and I can only speak of here. Like I said, I can almost guarantee at the start it definitely would have.
Yeah.
It would have absolutely, within those probably first 3 years, it absolutely would have. And by strengthen, I don't mean you have to have a good relationship with a whānau to have a strengthened relationship.
Yeah.
You know, if they don't like something and then you get a clearer idea of why they don't like something, to me, that's a positive. So that's a strength in a relationship, even if there's a disagreement in point of views. And I think whether you were all for it or you thought it was just a, slap a Māori badge on something and that's all you're doing, you still don't care, you were closer to getting an authentic understanding. And that's a good thing. In terms of, I guess, more nowadays, it's not so much the events that happen within the community that spurring that, the building of relationships with our own whānau, and particularly Māori one. It's more the fact that we know that platform and that thing is happening at that time. So the things we do ourselves around that would have. So we don't go to the dawn viewing, we say, oh, there's a dawn viewing, but we now, every second year, we kind of book out the marae, we go start the marae, we go do our own one, and we do our own stuff the next day. And if it didn't start at the very start, then there's potential we wouldn't have been doing that now. So those things that we choose to do that require engagement, and we want whānau to help. When we, at the, what do you call it, at the celebration last year, the concert, we didn't do kapahaka. So we did a presentation or display of, we told a story, but then we had for about 4 weeks, we had all different parents making costumes and all that. So, if we don't do it, then that opportunity doesn't happen. So all of that kind of stuff, it happens in more, I guess, intimate and unique ways to what was happening for us individually. But it definitely had a positive effect.
I'll let you just see with the marae and that. I keep saying this initiative, but it's results maybe from the initiative. Is it strengthen relationships with the local marae or iwi?
I don't think purely due to matariki, in my perspective, in my experience, not purely due to that. There's been other things along the way that have had more impact. That is on the list of things that we have. So it's not like where we have progressed to is not solely down to something like Matariki Waihi. Matariki Waihi definitely would have helped in terms of some of the direction and some of where we've got to. So I think yes, in some ways, and at various times with more effect, and at other times with less effect. But in general, was to generalize it, it's definitely helped.
Up here, I think. My next thing about that was that, are there any collaborative initiatives outside of Matariki Waihi that this learning community undertaken to help build cultural responsiveness? You were talking about the Te Pūmama.
Pūmama, yeah. So that's kind of, we recycled back through it. So that was, us got together on that one, close to 5 years ago now. And building back on that, because I think at that time, by that stage, he was the only principal that had been on the very first one through. Mike had retired I don't think Sean was there. Yeah, so everyone, from a leadership standpoint, he did the only one that had been through it.
Yeah.
And I had been through it as not on the first one, but on that first time, and even a lot of not a huge amount of teachers actually hadn't. So that was a kawiako stuff.
Yeah.
When that was beginning in terms of a binding thing to get on a similar wave. So that has kind of come through that initiative in terms of trying to build this stuff. In terms of other collaborations, I guess there have been other ones that have been tried, not necessarily with the sole purpose of Te Ao Māori, but maybe from Te Reo Māori, or building that cultural responsiveness, but maybe building, I don't know, through a leadership lens, the space for all those kind of things, and how do we as leaders from a bit more specialised things, and I think there have been offerings. It has been hard to get some of those across the line, whether that's for whatever purpose, I don't know. But really honestly, I don't think currently the collaborative environment across leadership in Waihi is healthy. We're not part of the kawiako anymore. Now the board withdrew at the end of last year.
Yeah.
Doesn't, and it's not because we don't want to collaborate, it's so that we can collaborate more without having to fit into a hierarchical process of how we're supposed to collaborate. So now I don't have to go to the top and go down to the person that I just go to straight away.
Yes.
We just go straight to the person we know straight away.
Yeah.
And bang, 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 bang. We could just, it's like it used to be. You know, get emails. Someone would love to come out and look, yes, we have come out. Instead of, oh, hang on a minute, we'll just talk about to the
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So in terms of, I think initially Matariki Waihi, from what I saw, and I was in a leadership position, it was the first time I actually saw all leaders of all the schools, even if they didn't believe in it, they were seen to be in one direction on one thing.
Yeah.
Cool. Maybe it's a good thing we question things more now though, because maybe we have a bit more insight and a bit more knowledge, and that's maybe a good thing. And maybe it is more authentic. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but in terms of collaboration around those other initiatives, most of them now it's probably more process driven through the kawiako. And that's because PLD is now attached, or the first bite of it is attached to they get prioritized. So. Another interview on that.
Right. So you've sort of answered this a bit before. Do you think there are still benefits in continuing with these annual events?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there is. Sometimes I think spaces need to change and they need to evolve and they need to move in ways that allow them to be purposeful for what is needed at that time.
Yeah.
But also in a time constraint within education, sometimes if you remove something, it will get swallowed up. That opportunity, that space will get swallowed up by something else. So, even though there have been times where I personally have butted my head into a brick wall about, like, oh, why do you just want to keep doing the same thing? Like, what is this actually? If those people weren't wanting to just do the same thing, then maybe that space wouldn't have been occupied because other priorities, other people would have taken. So, yeah, absolutely. I think it's a good thing that it's still there and it's still available. And I'd like to think that if you come back and in another 12 years' time, that it may look completely different, or it may look exactly the same, but imagine if it is still there and there's something to be said on that.
Yeah. So. 12 years is a long time. Yeah.
That's all. If you think about our primary schools, that's 2 cycles of a year one to primary school. That's pretty crazy.
2 cycles, There's nothing, and is there anything that right now that you would add or change to the current process of Matariki events?
Probably not any that I haven't already shared. I've got no problem sharing, my big thing is that with that Matariki stuff, it has to be, as the people that run it, organise it, lead it, whatever, whoever they are and whatever their role. The key part is if it's in education, it's got nothing to do with the adults in the room. It's got to do with the kids. So the only thing I wouldn't change it, but I will probably constantly to the chagrin of others,
Mm.
question is are you doing this for the kids, or are you doing it for the people that want to see the kids doing it?
Right.
Because parents love seeing their kids on stage, dressed up beautifully, singing nicely. They love it.
Mm.
So is that, are the efforts for the kid, or the efforts for what the kid does for people? Because yes, you can feel both at once. I do believe that.
Mm.
But if we're only doing things to be seen to be doing the right things,
Mm.
then there needs to be a deeper layer as to why this continues.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it just becomes some things are cool. It's just what we do. Like that can be cool. Don't get me wrong, but you could line 6 different kura
Mhm.
doing the same thing,
Mhm.
and you have 6 different takes on the depth and the importance of what's happening at that moment.
Yeah.
I do still think that if it's going to be Matariki Waihi and it's going to use the idea of collaboration and a kaupapa of everyone, then there should be a really strong binding thing, regardless of whether it's just your one-off or you do it all the time.
Yeah.
There's that one that does keep that connection across.
Yeah.
Because without it, it's easy to question the purposes.
Mm.
So that is my only thing that I don't actively point it out, but if the conversation turns into, this is great, and parents are listening, like, hang on, mate. I ain't turning up these meetings in my own time to talk about making parents happy, because that is not what we should be about. The whole thing was a platform to create change. So is this still a platform to create change, or is this now a platform to create appeasement and pleasure for, so it's keeping that why at the heart of it.
Yeah.
That's the only thing, and it's not a change, but it's constantly the people in the shoe.
Right. I think that is it. That is it. But I was just going to ask you if you would, not today, but would you have any students that you think would be happy to have a kōrero with me about their views on?
It'd be interesting actually to some of us, because some of them might even sit there and say,
What's that? Yeah, exactly.
and that's cool. You can come in and talk like, kids are, they're easy ears and they can't shut them up half the time. So if you do want your time, go for it.
Oh, thank you.
You'd be well worth talking to my sister if you've got the contact details. She's having me pass them on to you, because she was on the original setup before even the Matariki, before the actual Matariki Waihi, what happened that first year.
Yeah.
She was part of the setup for the motivation that the principal was making that.
Oh, okay.
So I'll flick you her email and stuff, and she'll happily talk to you about it.
Oh, too?
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So she'll have.
Yeah.
And Cookie's the other one. If you haven't already messaged her, if you haven't got an email, I'll flick her details as well, because
I don't have it in
she wasn't even a teacher at the time. I think she's working for the Trust Board
Oh, okay.
when that first happened.
Yeah.
And it was part of her. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. I think she was doing a teacher training.
Wow.
That first one.
Look how far everyone's come.
Yeah. So that'd be well worth it in terms of, if you're wanting to flesh out a certain angle or whatever.
Yeah.
Find out more.
Who's your sister?
Where?
Who?
Oh, Tracy. Lucky.
Oh.
Yeah.
She is you. Oh, I knew you guys were related. I didn't know. Yeah. Yeah, she would be good.
Yes, I'll flip you through the.
Oh, thank you. That would be great. And I sort of still playing with the student survey, but I've got a teacher survey in here, and it's just a Google survey. Do you think your teachers would mind us?
Yeah, they won't mind.
So if I could grab some.
Have you got one question in there? One thing that'd be interesting in a teacher one.
Yeah.
It would be really interesting to know. This is just for me.
No, that's good. I want to know.
As to whether the teacher that fills it out was someone that was there for the original compared to one that's now new to the community.
Yeah.
That would be really interesting, because then if you could separate their data, the analysis of trends could be interesting.
Well, I've got here.
Like how long they've been teaching, and why type of thing. So you'd kind of be able to gauge